This is ACS Blog. We're with Ahilan Arulanantham,
That's right.
the Deputy Legal Director of the ACLU of Southern California. You testified today before the House Judiciary Committee's Subcommittee on Immigration Policy and Enforcement regarding a measure that would seem to give the government quite a bit more power to detain individuals, detain people, in particular non-citizens. Can you let us know the constitutional problems with this measure, and also policy-wise, does it make any sense?
Yes, that's right. So there are serious constitutional problems with the bill that Lamar Smith, Representative Smith, proposed today. Two basic problems. And the first one is the bill would vastly expand the federal government's authority to detain non-citizens for prolonged periods of time, months, sometimes years, while their cases are pending in the immigration courts and then on review in the federal courts. And those portions of the bill actually apply to people who've never been convicted of crimes. As it turns out, about half of the people in the nation's immigration detention centers have no criminal convictions at all. And yet under this bill, those people would be denied the opportunity to go before an immigration judge and seek bail while their cases are pending. The other serious problem with the bill is that it authorizes the indefinite, potentially permanent detention of certain non-citizens who can't be deported to their countries. So people from Cuba, Vietnam, Somalia sometimes. There's no country to take them back. Under this bill, such people could be detained for the rest of their lives just because there's no country to accept them. Those are the two most serious constitutional problems that the Supreme Court has made very clear over a number of different decisions, that non-citizens are protected by the Due Process Clause too, because they're also persons within the meaning of the Fifth Amendment. But this bill would strip them of their due process rights. It's also extremely bad policy, just apart from the constitutional problems. It costs about $45,000 per detainee per year to detain somebody in immigration detention. So when you're talking about detaining a number of people who have no criminal history or only have very old convictions or convicted of very minor crimes, those are people who don't present a danger or a risk of flight, and yet our government is now going to pay thousands and thousands of dollars to detain each of them. That's money that could go to firefighters or teachers or many other things. And of course, those people are then kept away from their families. So there's sort of a double economic impact. And nonetheless, the Republican, fiscally conservative Congress is proposing this bill, and we're hopeful that it'll be defeated.
You mentioned a couple of Supreme Court cases. Is it fair to say that this measure is an attempt to circumvent those cases? Is this a response to those cases?
Yes, I think it's an attempt to overrule them, in the sense that the courts have ruled on statutory grounds. They've said we see serious constitutional problems with detaining people potentially for their whole lives, and therefore we've construed the immigration statutes not to authorize that, but instead to only authorize detention for a reasonable period of time where deportation is actually possible at the end of it all. But now this bill would go back and rewrite the statutes to explicitly authorize such indefinite detention and then invite the court to rule on its constitutionality.
Mm-hmm. In your testimony today, did you mention or bring up cases of citizens who are wrongly detained right now and the plight of these individuals?
I did, and I had a chance to do that in part because many of them have been my clients. People who I talk to regularly. I mentioned a Christian minister from Indonesia who I had dinner with this past Sunday. He was detained for 2.5 years in an immigration detention center, even though he was an asylum seeker who'd never been convicted of any crime or even charged with any crime. But under this bill, he would have actually been locked up and not been even given the bond hearing, which is how he ultimately got out. I mentioned another man, an asylum seeker from Sri Lanka, who was detained for 4.5 years. He kept winning his case, but the government kept appealing it and locked him up while it appealed. And he too is somebody who would have remained in detention for all that time under this bill. He lost half of his 20s, sitting in immigration detention while other people, finished school and started jobs and families. He sat there, $45,000 a year, we paid to keep him locked up. So I brought these stories to the committee's attention in the hopes that it would persuade them that this bill is a bad idea.